Hi class, it's Mr. Hand here. We're just going to have a look at how we solve and then sketch a quadratic equation. First things, there are 4 steps to this process. First thing we need to do is find the x-intercepts, which we have here, then find the y-intercept. Step 3, is to find the x and y coordinates of the turning point, and then we need to plot and sketch the graph. So the equation that we're working off was one from our PowerPoint 1 of sketching parabolas, which is y equals x minus 3 and x plus 2. So this equation's already been factorized for us. We'll start off with step 1. When we are trying to find our x-intercepts, there's 2 options available to us. We can either use the quadratic equation, or we can use the null factor law, which I've just referenced as NFL here. This one's already been factorized for us. So I think we can see that it's already going to be a simple solve using the null factor law. So we're just going to go with the null factor law equation. So something to remember when we are looking for the null factor law is that we're looking for the x-coordinates. So the x-coordinates are the points along a graph where y equals 0. Because if we had an x-coordinate that intercepted the line at, say, 3 here, obviously our y value at 3 is 0. It's at the point of origin. So just keep in mind when we're doing this that we're looking for our x-coordinate, the place where our parabola crosses the x-intercept, which will also be the point at which y equals 0. So using this, remember, and now null factor law says that a times b can equal 0, and therefore either a or b will be 0. So we're going to set our equation, x minus 3, x plus 2 equals 0. So we've made our y equal 0 from this point. And then these are our 2 factors here, a and b equals 0 in terms of the null factor law. So that means when x minus 3 equals 0, then x is going to equal 3. So I've just added 3 to both sides here to get my x equals 3. And when x plus 2 equals 0, then x equals negative 2. Once again, I've just taken away 2 from both sides. So what this means is we've found our x values at the x-intercept. So our x-intercepts have x values. Our x-intercepts have x values of 3, and they have y values of 0. And the other x-intercept has an x value of negative 2 and a y value of 0. Keeping in mind that these are our coordinates, our x and y coordinates. So what that is saying to me on my graph, when x equals 3, y equals 0, and when x equals negative 2, y equals 0. So now we'll move on to step 2, which is finding the y-intercept. And just for ease of making my graph, at the end of this video, I'll just move these x coordinates up higher. So step 1 I've done, and I've found my x-intercepts of 3 and 0 and -2 and 0. Okay, now when we're finding our y-intercept, once again, when we look along this graph, if I have a y-intercept is the point at which we cross our y-axis along here. This is our y-axis, remember, this is our x, if you've forgotten. So the point at which we cross our y-axis, our x value at this point of origin here is going to be 0. So a simple way to find the y-intercept is to sub a y value of 0, let's say let y equals 0, into our original equation, which is y equals x minus 3, x plus 2. Apologies, I've messed that up. We're going to let x equal 0, because at our y-intercept, our x value is 0. Apologies about that. So we sub into our equation to find out what y is. Our y is going to equal our new x value of 0 minus 3 and our new value, x value of 0 plus 2. So I've literally just subbed this 0 here. We've decided to let x equal 0 because the value of x at the y-intercept is 0. I've just put that x into these two spots in this equation. That's given me this here. So y equals 0 minus 3 and 0 plus 2. So that means my y is going to equal -3 times 2. So that's going to give me a y value of -6. So just like when we found our x-intercept, we have to remember that this is just the coordinate, this is just the y value of my y-intercept. My actual y-intercept is going to be 0 because the value of x at the y-intercept is 0 and our y-intercept takes place at a value of -6 on the y-intercept. So we'll just go back up here. We now have a y-intercept of 0, -6. Our next step, step 3, find the x and y coordinates of the turning point. So there's two formulas for the turning point. For this one, because we already know our x coordinates, we can use the midpoint formula. That's the x coordinate, or the x value of the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So keeping in mind that our x coordinates were 3 and 0 and -2 and 0. So we just sub those values in as x1 and x2. I'm going to sub that in there, I'm going to sub that in there. So that gives us 3 plus -2 divided by 2, which gives us -1 divided by 2, which gives us correction. Sorry guys, made a little mistake. It's not negative, it's +1 divided by 2. So that gives us an x value of 0.5 at our midpoint. So what I want you to keep in mind, guys, is in terms of coordinates of our midpoint, we now just know our x value, but we don't know what the y value of that coordinate is. just yet. Remembering these are x and y coordinates of my turning point. So to find this y value, we're going to use our initial equation again. So find the y value of our turning point. To do that, we just sub in our new x value that we found of 0.5 into our equation, because this is going to tell us what the y value is, remember? So y equals x, sorry, I've completely forgotten what it is, x minus 3, x plus 2. So we're going to let x equal 0.5, because we found that from this turning point formula. And we want to know what y equals when x equals 0.5. So once again, I'm just going to sub this new x value into these 2 points in my formula. That will tell me what y equals. So y is going to equal 0.5 minus 3 and 0.5 plus 2. So y is going to equal negative 2.5 times positive 2.5, and that gives us a value of negative 6.25. So up here, remember, we had found our x value of our coordinate right here, and now we just found the y value of our coordinate. So our coordinates of our turning point are 0.5 and negative 6.25. So just go up here. We've done step 3. Our values are 0.5 and negative 6.25. Once again, remembering that they're our coordinates. So I just need to plot and sketch my graph. So first thing, we'll plot and sketch we'll plot our x values. So we have 3 and 0. So keep in mind, guys, when we're doing this, this is our x value, that's our y. We always go x first. So my x value of 3 and 0, so that's right here. And my other x-intercept is negative 2 and 0. Negative 2 and 0. So at this point is 3 and 0. We have an x value of 3 and a y value of 0. And this one is negative 2 and 0. We have an x value of negative 2 and a y value of 0. Keep in mind, guys, that this point here is 0, 0. That's our origin. Next thing we do is we plot our y-intercept, which has an x value of 0 and a y value of negative 6. So we started our origin, we've got an x value of 0 here, and then we're going to go down to negative 6. That's my y-intercept. You can see our parabola points are starting to take shape. And then we need to find our turning point. So the x and y coordinates, once again, this is our x value, this is our y value. We've got an x value of 0.5. So an x value of 0.5, halfway here between the 1 and 0. And we're down at negative 6.25, which is approximately here. So now that we've plotted our 4 points, we've got our 2 x-intercepts, our y-intercept, and our turning point. You can sketch this. Not a real strong point of mine sketching, but we'll try and make this look neatish. And that, guys, is something like what our quadratic looks like. So when we're doing this, guys, just remember there's 4 steps. You just need to find those x-intercepts using the null factor law of the quadratic equation. Then find the y-intercept, and we can do that by subbing x equals 0 into our initial equation, because the value of x at our y-intercept is 0. Then we find the x and y coordinates of the turning point. In this case, we used the x1, x2 divided by 2 formula, and I'll show you how to do the other formula in another video. And once we have those points, we just plot and sketch our graph like we did. Thanks for listening.